This is Piers Morgan Tonight. We'll get to my interview with Hugh Hefner in a few moments, but first, Casey Anthony. She'll be a free woman in just days. On Sunday, she'll be released after being found not guilty in the death of her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. And joining me now is the woman who was at her side throughout that infamous trial, attorney Dorothy Clay Sims. Dorothy, I say infamous because it's attracted so much attention, so much speculation, and as you will be very aware, a lot of negativity towards your client. What was your overview? Were you even remotely surprised at the verdict?
Well, I feared for the worst and hoped for the best. That was how I went into the courtroom when we were told it was time for the verdict to be read. There were a lot of emotions that were washing over me at that time. I can't even begin to explain. Overwhelming gratitude, I think, for the system, for our system of justice, for those jurors who listened so attentively. They were very, very present during that trial. And I am ashamed for those people that are attacking those jurors. I'm really shocked and disappointed at the people who have lashed out at the jurors who were present, who sat there, who watched. I think that's wrong, and I feel bad for those people, you know.
I think it is bad for the justice system. I mean, certainly the jurors, it seemed, from most reasonable expert legal opinion that I've certainly spoken to, the jurors had little choice in the end, in the technicality of the law. Let me ask you about the personal side of this, because you spent so much time with Casey Anthony, both in the courtroom and outside of it. You know her very well. She's been very demonized, there's no question of that, by the American public. A lot of that based on their own views of what they think happened. What kind of woman is she, do you think? How would you summarize her?
Well, I think the best way to summarize her is to parrot the testimony that was actually given in the trial. The two individuals, for example, who worked in the jail with her, they saw her day in and day out for years. They described her as kind. They described her as respectful and not angry, not cruel. The people that knew her before she was arrested, there were a number of witnesses that were provided by the state that described her as loving, as kind, as mothering to her friends, as a good mother, an amazing mother. Those were the people that the state produced to testify in this case, and that is the person, those are the characteristics that I saw.
Can I ask you, are you a mother, Dorothy?
Yes.
Could you ever imagine a scenario where one of your children went missing and for 31 days you didn't report it?
Actually, that is an excellent question, because the question was phrased, could you imagine? The grief expert, the trauma expert who testified in the trial, explained that people respond, everyone responds differently to a traumatic situation. So we cannot possibly imagine how someone else might feel. And I think it's even difficult to imagine how we ourselves might react to a traumatic situation. I've been receiving communications from a number of people who had been in situations, very traumatic situations, and they felt validated by the testimony of the expert because someone was explaining their responses, their reactions. They felt that perhaps they weren't understood until she explained that everyone responds differently to that. So the key...
Yeah, but look, I mean, one of the reasons that I think she's attracting so much negativity is that I don't know anybody, however traumatic the incident would be, and this is my problem with the case, who would not report a missing very young child for over a month. And even worse, it seemed to me, go partying in that period, because, you know, how traumatic is it if you're able to actually go partying? I mean, it seemed to me very, very, very strange behavior, and I can't get a rational reason for it. I can hear all the experts tell me about post-trauma and all the rest of it, but can you honestly imagine anybody that you knew who's a mother ever behaving like that?
Well, I think the key word that you just said is rational. I think any reaction to trauma isn't necessarily going to be rational. You can't say, all right, this event occurred and this is how I expect you to behave. I think that you can't do that. And she explained that. She explained, I think, retail therapy. She explained how younger people respond differently than older people. There is no way to predict or explain how someone can react. So I think she was the best person to really answer that question.
I mean, when the verdict came in, I felt that one of the main reasons, actually, why this became a kind of caricature trial with baddies and goodies and so on, was the fact there were cameras in there. What is your view of trial by television? Because we don't have it, for example, where I come from in Britain, and it seems that without the cameras we don't lose anything. But you do lose something here in America because it tends to turn these trials into a soap opera.
Well, you know, I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in so much that surrounds that. But I will tell you personally, I found it very awkward and disturbing. For example, I would be having conversations, and in the evening I would see that there were lip readers and people who were body language experts going on television saying this was what appears to have been said, or this is what was meant when this attorney moved this way, or my client turned her head a certain way. I mean, imagine being on television for 400 or 500 hours of a trial. It's incredibly stressful. And I think also very stressful for the witnesses who knew that as they spoke, every word they said was being televised. And I think it couldn't help but affect maybe not so much what they said, but how they said it. I found it extremely, extremely difficult.
Tell me this, Dorothy, what is your gut feeling about what happened to Kaylee Anthony?
Well, I think that the key here, in my opinion, was the state able to prove that Casey murdered her daughter, and did they meet the burden of proof? And the response is no. The juries, I believe those that have spoken, have come back and said who, what, where, when, and how. That's really the key. There wasn't anything linking Casey to the scene where the remains were found. In fact, the testimony indicated that some of the botanical evidence at the scene, it was not found in her car. There was no DNA.
But tell me this, I mean, do you believe personally that she drowned in the swimming pool and there was a cover-up? Is that what you personally believe?
I believe that this was an accident that snowballed out of control. And I think that if you think about things rationally, when you have someone who's presented as a good mother by the state's expert, there was no motive. That I think some of the jurors were really grappling with that one. There wasn't any relationship there with a motive why she would do this, when it would occur, how it would occur. Yes, I believe it was an accident that snowballed out of control. And I think that the jury, when they came back with the not guilty verdicts, did so because they had a lot of questions. And I think having questions that weren't answered, I think that may be some of the hue and cry that we may be seeing in the public.
Obviously, on Sunday, your client comes out of prison and she will be looking to rebuild her life in an atmosphere of pretty extreme animosity towards her. Are you concerned about her ability to lead a free life in relative safety?
I am concerned for her, but I would hope that as time passes, more compassion would be the feeling of the day, and that her privacy would be respected, along with those of the jurors and anyone else, witnesses affiliated with the case, everyone having to do with the case. I would hope that they would be respected. So that would be my hope for her.
I watched an interview with Joy Behar last night that you did, in which she asked you directly, would you be happy for Casey to be a babysitter to your children? And I have to say your answer was not immediate and seemed a little uncertain. Do you want to clarify it?
Well, I went into the case. I was asked to come and donate my time for free to work in this case, to work on the science aspect. I wasn't asked to come in to determine or find a babysitter for adult children. There was a disconnect That wasn't my role. And the Casey
No,
Anthony
but you know what she was getting at. I mean, what she was getting at is, yes, she's coming free on Sunday, Casey, but clearly her behavior after whatever happened was so irrational to most people's eyes that she would be deemed by most people now to be a threat, or not a threat so much as a risk around young children. Would you accept that?
Well, I think before you determine someone as a risk, you have to take the time to understand them. You have to spend time with them, and you have to understand yourself the basis for the behavior. And I don't think that that they can judge that behavior. They can say, I know why she did this. I understand. So, I mean, the real issue for me is, as my role in this case, is was there evidence? Was there a problem with some of the forensic evidence? That was my focus. And the 31 days had nothing to do with whether or not she was guilty. It had nothing to do with that. And I think the jurors' response, those jurors that have come forward and spoken about that, have discussed that. I think that's...
But you would accept, I mean, can I just throw that one back at you one more time? I mean, because it seems to me key to trying to understand this case. I mean, have you ever heard of or been involved with any case like this in your life where a mother has not reported a child missing for over 30 days?
Well, the responses that I've gotten back from the people that have experienced trauma, actually there were several responses that talked about situations where they pretended the individual in their life had not really died. So there are, I think it may be more common, that reaction, that type of reaction, than you realize, and that's why Dr. Carrioth, who is the grief expert, she had 40,000 hours involved in dealing with reactions to trauma. She treated people for free for years. She had a book on the subject, and she, I believe, explained we can't predict that, and we can't know.
Dorothy Clay Sims, thank you very much indeed. On Monday, I'll talk to the woman who's followed this case perhaps as much as Dorothy, Nancy Grace from HLN. Coming up next...